Hello there. Greetings, Jen. A Julian Assange question. Given that President Biden has said he is considering dropping the Julian Assange prosecution, and Donald Trump says he'd give serious consideration to pardoning him, on this one issue, does it matter which of the two presidential candidates wins?
Very interesting question. Jen?
Well, for me, whichever president ends the 14-year persecution of my client for award-winning publications in the public interest will be the better outcome for Julian Assange. But the fact is...
Do you feel, though, now, at the heart of that question, that in the US there is a similar view emerging from both sides?
What is really promising about this is the emerging bipartisan view about the problematic nature of this case and the fact that it needs to be brought to an end. So we have bipartisan support here in Australia. We've had Prime Minister Albanese coming out saying enough is enough. We've had Peter Dutton support that proposition. We've had 2/3 of Australia's parliament pass a parliamentary resolution calling on the US and the UK to drop this case. We've had President Biden come out saying he's considering dropping it in response to Australia's requests. We have to remember this is an Australian citizen, an award-winning journalist who won the Sydney Peace Prize. He's won journalism awards the world over, been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize every year, and the US is seeking to put him in prison for 175 years for that. That is a Trump administration indictment. The Obama administration chose not to prosecute because of the risk to press freedom. The Biden administration has allowed this to continue for reasons which I can only speculate. But this is the time. And for me, I don't want to wait for the US elections. We have the support of the Australian government. The US is considering dropping it. We won leave to appeal in a big blow to the US's case, where the British courts have recognised the fundamental problem with the fact that an Australian citizen will be denied First Amendment constitutional free speech rights if he is extradited. They are stealing his life. It has been 14 years and enough is enough. So from my point of view, we want a resolution and we want one soon. And it's time for the United States to drop this. It's time for President Biden to drop this. But of course, if we have an election and we end up with a President Trump, then we will absolutely be continuing our advocacy. And it's an opportune time for President Biden to drop this. Australia is requesting it. The people of Australia want it. Our government wants it. Trump is saying he would consider dropping it. So Biden is not going to get the political blowback.
It's an interesting
by making
point.
this
and
decision, which is the right one.
Do you take Trump at his word?
Look, President Trump has been all over the place, from saying, I love WikiLeaks, to indicting WikiLeaks, to when he was on his way out of office, we sought a pardon and did not get one from the Trump administration.
So you're nervous about how Trump might handle this?
I think we're all nervous about how Trump would handle any issue. But the point is, we have both presidential candidates saying, we will consider dropping this. This is not just about the Australian government's request. This is about free speech in the United States. This is about their constitutional protections, one of the most fundamental tenets of the US Constitution, which is being trashed by this prosecution. The New York Times, the Washington Post, free speech groups around the world say that this is criminalising public interest journalism. The Australian government wants it done. We are a huge ally to the United States, and it's time they listen and do something about it.
Well, we asked Australians what they think of the Julian Assange case. The Q+A YouGov poll shows 7 in 10 Australians want the government to be lobbying the UK and US for his release, with fewer than 30% saying he should be extradited to America to face trial. And if you want to see those results and others, you can check them out on the ABC News website. It is interesting, Parnell, it is overwhelming, the number of Australians who want to see action on this now.
Yeah, I think everybody's sick of this and thinks it should be just over. But of course, also, I would caution with that people think that this is now just a case about journalism, about somebody who has put facts into the public sphere which other people didn't want there. But the truth is, the case is about the fact that he tried to hack into a secure military file. So, I mean,
that's actually not correct. There is absolutely no evidence. Well, that's what the
allegation was.
Please explain to me the allegation in the case, because it's not hacking.
I'm sure you can explain it better.
Would you like to explain to me
the
basis upon which you call it hacking? There is absolutely no accusation of hacking. This is a question of receiving, possessing and publishing information. There is absolutely no allegation of hacking in that indictment, and I encourage you to read it because you will not find it.
Do you think, though, that he was perhaps a little, well, I'm not quite sure of the word, it was not done in the best possible way, the release of the WikiLeaks material, and the fact that much of the subject of the WikiLeaks material we have completely forgotten, yet we know about him. He became the story. Do you think he could have handled it better? I'm not saying that I totally agree with you. It's ridiculous. He's done his time more than enough and he should be released. But do you not concede that there was perhaps some mishandling?
Well, you've made a number of points. The first is that WikiLeaks publications have been some of the most important publications in our history. It's changed the way we talk about journalism. Those publications have been used in some of the most important human rights cases around the world, have demonstrated that the US was killing far more civilians than they were admitting. I mean, to suggest that people have forgotten what WikiLeaks did or the nature of the contents of those publications, I think is just not correct. And the impact on journalism stands true today. He's still winning journalism awards. He's still being nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. But to suggest it was mishandled, WikiLeaks had a huge amount of security protocols that were implemented with their media partners that they implemented. There was a redaction process, and it was one of the most important security procedures put in place. Journalists were not using encryption before WikiLeaks. The release of the material, to the extent that there was any mishap, was caused by The Guardian, not by the WikiLeaks. And people forget this. Not one person, there is not evidence of one person being physically harmed as a result of WikiLeaks publications. And so these statements that are made about WikiLeaks mishandling things, breaching security, putting lives at risk, these
it's a pretty complex story, I think that's right.
in court.
That's absolutely true.
Kim, I know you were trying to get in there.
Well, I think I'm probably the only one on the panel, and maybe I'm wrong. You might have a security clearance, but...
I definitely don't.
I definitely do not.
But I really want one.
Well, you might not, because in amongst this talk of Trump's reaction and Biden's reaction, we have a former president who is now, alleged to have taken classified information, obstructed the government from retrieving it, and tried to hide it at Mar-a-Lago in the bathroom. So for somebody like me, who had access to classified information and had a top-secret security clearance, I was deeply aware of the responsibility of handling that and properly, and the consequences if I didn't, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Having said that, there's an awful lot of information in the United States government that is classified that doesn't need to be, and that is not healthy for a democracy. So I think there's definitely an argument to be made that the declassification and various forms, levels of classification just aren't necessary. I don't know the deep circumstances of Julian Assange's case, obviously, like everyone aware of it. But, people make a decision on how they're going to respond to receiving classified information. They make a decision understanding the ramifications. There's no doubt that he's more than paid the price. I see President Biden's response to the question about whether you would return Julian Assange to Australia. I see that in a very positive, encouraging light, because he just turned around and said, yes, we are considering it. But, Biden, and I'm not here to promote Biden or any candidate or any president necessarily, but he is an empathetic person. He's a very compassionate person. I think that comes across in his presidency. It comes across in his personal life. He's suffered a lot of personal tragedy. And he's also a man of strong faith, Catholic faith. And I think he would be looking at this case, and particularly because the Australians have asked for the return of Julian Assange. And I know from my experience in government, Australia is a very important ally. Australia is considered in a very fond way. It's a strong alliance, and so I took that to mean that this could happen. The U.S. does have to go through processes to ensure, political, legal, and national security ramifications of such a decision. But to me, that looks like that could very well happen.